Hello, I'm John Grom, and welcome to our 81st Right and Left Discussion Forum. We hold our discussion panels twice monthly to demonstrate that open-minded discussion can defeat embedded beliefs that have no basis in truth and can discover common ground. Today, our panel will discuss the constitutional rights of privacy. Our panel, beginning on my left, is Patty Haskins, retired math teacher and member of the Wadsworth City Council. And on her left is Bryan Laubaugh, president of R&B Financial Services. And that's our whole panel for today. This is vacation season, and we've run short. Patty, as you know, the word privacy does not appear anywhere in the Constitution, but the 4th, 5th, and 14th Amendments have been interpreted to contain a constitutional right to privacy. What are your thoughts on this?
You mentioned the 4th, 5th, and 14th, and the 14th has been adopted because it's the probable cause amendment, saying that you can be secure in your home and there's no right of unreasonable search. The 5th Amendment, of course, grants you the right not to incriminate yourself, so that's looked upon as a privacy right. The 14th Amendment refers to your due process rights, so those are looked upon.
And equal justice.
And equal justice, yeah. Right. And so that's how it's been interpreted. I know Supreme Court Louis Brandeis had stated that the right to privacy is the right to be left alone by the government, which is kind of an interesting explanation of that.
Where is Mr. Brandeis when we need him?
Exactly, yeah. Exactly. This idea of privacy really didn't come to prominence until the 1890s. And originally it was brought up because of the concern of journalists and photographers that were taking pictures, and people, especially those that were in the news, felt that they had the right not to have to answer questions in the paper or have things written about them. This was in the era of yellow journalism, of course, or have their picture taken. Yeah. That right has basically been stripped away now, in so much as if you're considered a celebrity of any type or a public figure, then you don't have the same rights as others. It's interesting we have this topic this week because on Monday I attended a training session along with your wife, as a matter of fact, on the sunshine laws, and this is required for all public officials once during their term of office. So we have a 2-year term, so we every 2 years have to attend this, and it's ordered by the auditor of the state of Ohio that you have to do this, and there are all kinds of recriminations if you do not attend, and it's supposed to be like a 3-hour session. But interestingly enough, it brings up the privacy issue, and they basically tell us that you as a public official do not have privacy. Our address, our phone numbers are all public record that can be obtained, and the only way as a public official that you can restrict the right of someone to have that information is if there, for example, has been a threat against your life, which is why in most cases police officers, you do not have to reveal that information about them because there might be a threat upon them. But as a public official, as an elected official, you have to put that out. You have no privacy in your emails. Well, I shouldn't say none. Your privacy is limited as far as your emails. Anything that I email or a text or anything, Twitter or anything that has to do with anything concerning the government of the city is a public record. Now, quite often we get public records requests, whereas a citizen will come in and say, listen, I want all the information on the purchase of that front loader truck that you just purchased. And we have to submit any email, any written conversation that we have had concerning that. So if I had just simply texted a fellow councilman and said, really hate that, truck, or that truck is too much money, or we really need that truck, that has to be divulged. And this is really quite time consuming and really quite expensive for a city to have to comply with. But basically, anybody can do it. Now, there are limitations on that. They always cite at this conference a case. There was a gentleman, I believe it was a gentleman, in the area who was on a mission. He would go to all sorts of different public branches and say, I have a public records request for all the information on this zoning permit or whatever. And he would always make it broad, although you're supposed to keep it narrow, but he would make it large enough that it was going to require a great deal of work by the public entity, where they may get stacks of paper. And if he saw that they were complying, he never bothered to pick the information up. If they didn't comply to the letter, he would sue them. And there's all kinds of damages. Now, his case finally was thrown out when he sued because they said he had no standing to actually apply for that public records request, because what he was requesting did not affect him personally. It was obviously just a scam to get money. But other than that, you can have a public records request for anything. I know we've had 3 in the last year, I think, that I've had to respond to. There are other places, though, where privacy has gone the other direction, I think, and it's more private if you look at the HIPAA laws that are presently in effect. Anyone who's been to a doctor or hospital in the last few years knows that you have to sign who can be given information about you, and if you don't tell them, it can be your mother, your husband, your son, your daughter. If your name isn't on that list that they can have information about you, they don't get it. There are a few exceptions to that, I think, for the public good, that sometimes that information needs to be put out there. But that's one case where you do have privacy. Having worked in the schools, we would have privacy issues. And
with the students, not
with
the
the
teachers.
students, right. And for example, if you called a student to the office and you suspected that they were using drugs, you could ask them to take everything out of their pockets. Now, the student always had the right to refuse, but if they were to refuse, the administration could simply call the police and the police could come up and do the search. And so they could get it done. Now, the thing was, you cannot do that randomly. You can't just go bring in a whole line of kids and say, I'm going to empty your pockets. You have to have some, in a sense, probable cause in order to do that. The other privacy issue was always lockers, when they would come in and search the lockers. And they were considered not private because the lockers were actually owned by
School board.
by the school board. And that got a little touchy because the locks, a lot of times the kids had to buy the lock if it was the kind you put the lock on. So if they cut the lock, were they violating your privacy? And I always found it interesting. We would have the drug searches where the county would bring in the dogs and they would go through the school. And literally, there were times, I remember the one day we were shut down for 4 or 5 hours while they did the searches. The interesting thing is you'd go in your room, you'd have to lock the door, and you'd sit there with your kids, and you'd be there for hours. And then the dogs would come down the hall, and before they got near your room, someone would come down, knock on the door, and tell you to take your students outside of the room. And then the dogs would go in, and they would sniff backpacks and desks and so forth. They never
sniffed the kids.
Never sniffed the kids. There were a couple of reasons for that, and that they couldn't just randomly do that on the kids, but also because those dogs, when they actually find drugs, they claw. I mean, we had cases they would search the parking lot, and the cars would be destroyed because these dogs would be clawing at them. So obviously the safest place to keep the drugs was on yourself, but so those are some areas in which I've seen. True. I'm not telling anyone out there to do that. So
that's the disclaimer.
That's the disclaimer.
Brian, what are your thoughts?
Well, I think Patty brings up some very, very interesting points, and they're points that I would agree with totally. As far as the public records requests and the FOIA requests, I find it very interesting. Maybe we make it a little more current that we had a sitting Secretary of State that had her very own private server in her house. And that flies in the face of everything that I've ever been involved with politically. I can assure you that the mayor of the city of Wadsworth does not have a server in her basement. She complies with all the rules and regulations.
Are you sure?
I'm positive, because I can't afford a server. And that when people make these types of requests, a Freedom of Information Act or a public records request, that the city, and I know, they take that seriously.
They have to.
They
Yes.
take it very seriously, and I think the public should be assured that the city does everything that they can to comply with that, and they take it.
They do.
Take it very
I would like
seriously.
to think that Wadsworth is typical.
I think
of
it
towns
is.
in the
It's a very.
country.
Yes.
I would think so, and I would think most state governments and all, and every now and again you get situations like this that are completely so far out there. It's amazing. But one of the points that I'd like to bring up is that I think there are some privacy issues in the world that we live in now that we need to address, and that is the privacy of your cell phones, the privacy of your text messages. The NSA is just I think they currently have, or they just finished this very large data collection facility. It's based in Utah. It's hundreds of acres, from what I understand, of servers, and they can pick off cell phones and all that kind of stuff. And even though they say, well, we have sort of, to me, it's kind of like a star chamber court where nobody knows who's on it, and it's a judge, and that judge, it's taken to that judge. It's all done in secret, and then they determine if that person, they're going to actually wiretap their cell phone for terrorist reasons and all that kind of stuff. And I'm not against
To listen in on
to
the
listen in
content.
on conversations and all that kind of stuff. They have sophisticated algorithms that pick off words, and I think we've talked about this in the past. I always refer people to the movie Enemy of the State with Gene Hackman and Will Smith. If
Oh,
you want,
yes. Good movie.
Yeah, if you really want to see something that, and that movie's kind of dated.
I was going to say that's probably 10 years old.
At least, and the things that they have now, and I'm all for having intelligence and all that kind of stuff, but I guess I sort of lean a little bit towards the Rand Paul libertarian thing that there are some areas of your life that are private. I read an article about the cameras that are now on computers, that a hacker can get in there and activate that camera. And they noticed in this picture, I think it was Mark Zuckerberg and Bill Gates' computers, they've all taped over that camera, and they've taped over the sound pickup on the computer, because a hacker can get in there and turn that camera on and turn that sound on and collect. You walking around your kitchen, or let's say your computer's in your bedroom, and all of a sudden the light comes on, and they're collecting video of you. So I think we need to look at the rights of privacy that an individual has in a very technologically sophisticated world. And I can only imagine the amount of information that's being collected on a daily basis on the population because of the sophistication of everything. When everybody says, oh, Siri's great because you can talk in it and it recognizes voice recognition. Well, if you can take that to a multiple of 10 or 20, and they have voice recognition that they can recognize who it is, where it's coming from, and they can pick off particular words, that's a little troubling to me. I think there needs to be some effort there to protect our privacy in a technologically driven world.
Well, in a way, Homeland Security monitors everybody's telephone activity, and it's something called metadata. And metadata is supposedly not concentrating on content, but it will tell who you called, how long you were on the phone. It will include the phone number of the person that you called,
Does it?
the frequency, and
Does
so
it pick up like keywords or anything?
No.
Okay.
No, not unless they get a court order to go into the
Right.
into the content. But the fact is that when you when you're looking at, or if somebody has got a record of everybody that you call, how long you've been on the phone with them, what cell tower your call went through, what kind of phone you're using, how frequently you called, the locations that you called from, they've learned an awful lot about you.
Oh, sure.
I mean, if you have a number of phone calls to a cardiologist, the assumption is you've got a heart problem. So that's a piece of information that people have.
One of the things, John, you might want to, just recently there was a case where the terrorist had a cell phone and
San Bernardino.
the
attackers,
FBI wanted
yes.
Apple to go in and unlock that cell phone, and
They
Apple was
refused
put
to
in
do
a
it.
very precarious position.
Yeah.
You know, that's a privacy issue there. And I'm not for the terrorists. I don't want anybody to think that I want to protect the bad guy. But that same technology can be used against the general public. And it gets a slippery slope.
It's a balancing act. You know, your safety versus your privacy. You know, anytime you go to the airport and you have to be subjected to that search, you know, is it your privacy that's more important, or is it your safety? And in that, you know, in that case with the San Bernardino shooter, I think that's who it was.
Right.
Yes. And you know, the refusal to open it up. I think that the government was able to unlock it, even without the help.
Yeah.
Yeah, they hired some former hacker to cut a deal.
I'm sure there's a lot of them out there.
Well, that's just the point. They can hack into anything.
Right.
Now,
But
so.
Judge Scalia at one time made the comment that there's nothing new in the realization that the Constitution sometimes insulates the criminal of the criminals of the criminal activity of a few to protect the privacy of all, and voila, what you're talking about. But the big issue over the past few years has been workplace privacy, and what kind of privacy can you actually expect in your workplace? And the ACLU has been very, very active in trying to keep employers from monitoring your email, looking at your personal computer files, whether, I don't know what a personal computer file in the workplace amounts to.
Yeah, I was wondering, because
Yeah.
would be the work, if it's the computer belongs to the company, they contend they have the right to go through it.
Yeah, but they are, further outraged by monitoring of phone calls, having surveillance cameras in different places. I can understand having them in the bathroom, but I mean not having them.
I was going to say, whoa.
I mean being outraged by that.
Yeah.
And having access to your personnel file. Of course they have access to your personnel file. It's their property. Or providing third-party information to creditors, insurance agents, landlords, etc. When I look at this list of things, it makes all the sense in the world to me that if I'm paying you X number of dollars to work and perform activities for this company, I have every right to know what you're doing with your email, who you're emailing, what you're saying to them. I've got a concern about every employee that is in possession of trade secrets selling them to somebody. I have a right to know that. The monitoring phone calls, absolutely. Why not? You're on my dime.
Exactly, it's my phone, and I don't know who you're talking to.
Yeah.
And the ACLU, when it comes to access to personnel files, they're concerned that the employee does not have access to their own personnel file, which I don't know how many companies would deny access, but
The schools, you do have access. There's a procedure you have to go through. You have to call ahead of time to access your file, so they have a chance to pull it together. And you give them the time, and then you are entitled. You make an appointment. You go in and you sit down, and you can go through your entire file and challenge anything. Now that is a public entity. I do not know about private companies what the rules on that are, but.
But it's only my personal opinion. The company has broad latitude on checking into what their employees are doing while they're at work. And
it's interesting, I mentioned HIPAA laws before, and they're so strict and so forth. But you know, I know when I was with the schools, when you would make a claim on your insurance, that claim and what it was for would come back to the treasurer's office, who actually had access to every claim that came through and knew, you know, who had what. And now you just have to, you know, we've always been blessed with having very ethical, very bright, qualified people in that position that never released any information. But that's one way in which your privacy could be violated. Sure. I'm sure that there are many companies where the entire medical history of that person is known simply because they're covered by insurance paid for by the company. So.
I don't know if companies anymore give pre-employment physicals and do investigate somebody's medical history.
You might have to have a TB test or something. That's about it.
Yeah. I know that in my experience in the corporate world, back in the early to mid 80s, almost every new employee was given a physical of some sort. Well, mainly because the company then is responsible for their health care.
Well, that's ADA, I think, that forced them not to do that.
Is that right?
So that they don't discriminate against someone who does have a health problem.
Yeah. There was a point in time that we just stopped doing it. I don't remember being forced by anyone, but always gave pre-employment drug screens, even if you were a candidate for a vice presidency. We would do a pre-employment drug screen. And a lot of people are using that comparison to a pre-welfare payment drug screen and saying if people who work need to have a drug screen, what about people who don't work but live off the government? Should they? I don't know if that issue's ever been
I know
settled.
that's come up. That the one challenge to that was I'd heard someone said, well, I'll be more than happy to go for that for all welfare patients if every member of Congress and every member of the Senate takes a drug screen as well, because they're on the public dime. And I think because of that demand that all public officials then have to do it, that
they withdrew the request.
So.
You know, one of the things that's sometimes of interest is a lot of, I can't say a lot, but there are insurance companies that use basically a function of your credit score to determine your rates. Now, they don't call it that, they call it an insurance score, but you'll see advertisements on a variety of several different companies. They want to basically tap into your car. They want you to, you'll get a little bit of a reduced rate if you can go ahead and they tap into that little computer link that your car, most newer cars have, and that tracks a variety of things. You know, it tracks how fast you're going, it tracks, you know, all the different sensors. Wow. It can, and so the one company was doing a little advertisement called the Rate Suckers. And basically the people that wouldn't have this put on their car, they were the ones that were making everybody else's rates go up. So I thought the psychology of that was pretty interesting, but I think there's some privacy issues there. You know, there are certain risks that an insurance company bears when they insure your car or insure your life, and the notion that somehow you know, they need to collect all the information about you as far as when you get in that car and you know, all the things that you do, I think gets a little bit onerous and really starts stepping into an individual's private life.
You know, when we discuss privacy, and most of us, you know, get a little sensitive about it. We want to be private. And then I think about Facebook and what people put on Facebook.
Or your frequent shopper thing that you have scanned at the store. You give up all the privacy for 50 cents off.
And you don't even necessarily believe it, but you know, I look at what is put on the internet, onto Facebook, and I know what people have for dinner. I know, and you know, the one that amazes.
Have you been following my mother?
Oh, that drives me crazy. Not your mother. And the one that drives me nuts is people want privacy, and they go on vacation,
and they tell people,
and they post pictures. I'm in Colorado.
Well,
my house is empty. Come rob it.
The reason I bring up my mother is we try to do a pretty good job of not putting things on Facebook when we're gone.
No, you do it
And
afterwards.
we
I
tell
know.
our kids, don't put anything until we're home. Then you can start putting it on. Well, my mom gets on, and she's like, I tried, to the Facebook world. I tried calling you, but I guess you're on vacation. Was this you? Were you going to Utah this time? And I'm like, thanks, Mom. And they say, where are the pictures? I thought you were going to put some pictures up there. It's like, oh, please. I mean, it's amazing the amount of, just like Patty says, the amount of information that you can glean.
Yeah.
And I think there are companies, I'm pretty sure that they're going to have sort of your internet profile. They're going to start collecting. There have been cases where people have applied for jobs. They've gone in, they've taken a look at all the pictures that they put out there on Instagram, on Facebook, on Twitter, and they come back and say,
No,
we're sorry.
No.
We're not hiring you.
That night on spring break when you
Right.
were,
Yeah. And that has hurt people.
Yeah.
I have an idea that for most people, the idea of privacy is more precious than the reality of privacy.
Yeah, I would agree with that.
Yeah.
That you'll want to go to the ramparts to fight for your right to privacy. Then you give it away
Right.
for almost nothing. One other thing about drug tests that I think that you can speak to this, Patty, about are you allowed to do a random drug screen of high school students? I don't think that you are allowed to.
Sports teams, they can.
They can? Okay. That
Yes.
was something that went to the Supreme Court.
I believe they can.
I think, yeah.
There
was
was a girl whose family sued the Board of Education of whatever town it was in because they were demanding a drug screen in order to participate in the choir. And that was all.
That one that's a little interesting. I don't know for certain, but I'm guessing part of that is because you don't have a right to be on a football team or something.
Yeah. Well, thank you. Very good discussion. I will end with this quote from David Brinkley, one of my all-time favorites. When it comes to privacy and accountability, people always demand the former for themselves and the latter for everyone else. David Brinkley. Good night, Chet.